And once again, welcome everyone to the Los Angeles Birders webinar for tonight. We are very, very happy to have Van, Morgan, and Sam with us to present this wonderful, wonderful webinar. As I was saying earlier, many of Los Angeles birders were involved in the first rendition of the LA County Breeding Bird Atlas. We wanted one of the primary objectives of creating Los Angeles Birders was to do another rendition of that breeding bird atlas. We Lance Benner, who's on here somewhere, spearheaded our winter bird atlas two winters ago, and it was very successful. But well, not a but, and that's when we brought Van on to help us out with what we're going to be doing. And then Van just took the ball and ran. And you are going to see now the outcome of that. And to introduce Van and Dr. Morgan Tingley and Sam Saffron, I'd like to introduce Tori Fay, our program chair.
Great.
Tori.
Thanks, Ron. We're very excited to welcome you to this special session of one of the most ambitious and collaborative bird conservation efforts in state history, the upcoming launch of California's first statewide breeding bird atlas, led by the newly established 501c3 nonprofit organization, California Bird Atlas. Leading this effort is a team with deep expertise in field ornithology, conservation science, and large-scale biodiversity projects. First, many of you know Van Pierszalowski, who's the executive director of the California Bird Atlas. Van brings a unique blend of field skill, community connection, and passion for California birds. After completing a California Big Year in 2023, Van has continued to lead statewide initiatives that bridge expert science and grassroots birding communities. Joining him tonight is Dr. Morgan Tingley, professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at UCLA, and a highly respected voice in bird conservation and climate-related biodiversity research. Dr. Tingley is also the president-elect of the American Ornithological Society and chairs the California Bird Atlas Science Advisory Committee, helping to ensure that this new atlas effort is grounded in strong peer-reviewed science and positioned to shape conservation decisions for decades to come. Also with us is Sam Saffron, Science Director of the California Bird Atlas. Sam brings extensive experience in conservation biology, avian monitoring, and data integration. He's playing a central role in designing the Atlas's scientific framework and coordinating efforts between agencies, scientists, and volunteers across the state. Together, this team will introduce the goals, scope, and structure of the California Breeding Bird Atlas, an inclusive multi-year project to document the timing, abundance, and distribution of breeding birds across California. Whether you're an eBirder, a field ornithologist, or someone just looking to get involved, this session will give you the tools and context to understand how the statewide effort is being built and how you can help. Please join me enthusiastically in welcoming Van Pierszalowski, Dr. Morgan Tingley, and Sam Saffron.
All right, I'll get into slideshow mode. Everyone can see that okay?
That looks great.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. We have a packed program here. Just to give you a quick overview of the talk, first, we're just going to go general introduction. Then we're going to talk about the organization itself, California Bird Atlas, a bit about the timeline, what to expect in terms of the eBird Atlas, which is a development we're making alongside the Cornell lab currently. 5, we're going to take a little tour of the grid. 6 is mysterious, the question, what could that mean? You'll find out. Then moving on to historical data rescue project, how to get involved, and then finally Q&A. First up, introduction. I was asked, as mentioned by Lance and Kimball, God, a year and a half ago now, if I'd be interested in taking over leading the second LA County Breeding Bird Atlas. And I had a lot of questions, one of which is, what is a breeding bird atlas? I had heard of breeding bird atlases, but I, as someone who discovered birding a little later in life, I had never participated in one directly. And just to kind of level set with everyone what a breeding bird atlas is, It's a systematic multi-year effort to document the distribution and breeding behaviors, that's very important, of all bird species within a defined period, providing a time-bound snapshot of both the distribution, but also phenology of all bird species across a state. And basically what you do is you take a region. The concept was invented in Europe in the 1960s. And in Europe, they often do breeding bird atlases at a country level. This idea got to the US in the 70s, and they started doing it by state. But you decide on an atlas region. So in this case, it'll be California. You then divide that into blocks, which are uniformly sized. You define an atlas period, which is typically 5 years. 5 years intentionally, which it's long enough to smooth some variation. If it was just 1 year or 2 years, you might get an eruption year of robins and this or that, or 5 years it smooths out some of that variation, but still being short enough to be a snapshot. It's not over 15 years, it's still a snapshot in time. And you're not looking for comparison between year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. You're looking at the cumulative 5-year period and the data that you've been able to collect during that period. Very importantly, during the atlas period, atlasers document not just presence absence for all bird species, but also breeding behaviors. At the onset and throughout, completion criteria is typically decided to varying degrees, ensuring that there's adequate coverage across the entire region. And then the idea is every 20 or 30 years, this happens again, and you can look very easily at how things have changed. My next question was, I know, there have been breeding bird atlases in California, but I've also know that there's some states that have done statewide breeding bird atlases. How many? 44! 44! 44 states have conducted statewide breeding bird atlases. 19 have conducted more than one. And it's hard these days to find a map that looks like this, where California is the same shade as only Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Alaska, and Hawaii are the others unpictured. And so I was like, okay, well, I know that, but what, county atlases have been a thing in California. How many, county bird atlases have been published in the state? We have 58 counties. At this point in time, there's a couple in the works right now, but at this point in time, only 15 of the 58 counties have successfully published breeding bird atlases, which is just 17% of the state's land area. Furthermore, 14 and 15 are coastal and densely populated areas. I don't know if you'll notice a little coastal bias there in the data set other than Nevada County. And so I started looking at this, and I started thinking about the idea of doing an LA County breeding bird atlas, but then I kept going back and forth between this map and this map and this map and this map. I said, and then I was like, well, it's time, but maybe we don't have to do this. Like, maybe there's just eBird now. Maybe we don't need atlases now. And so I got with Morgan and Sam, and we downloaded eBird data, the eBird basic data set for California for all years. We looked at March through August. This is up to October 2024. We subdivided the state into atlas blocks. And we're pretty shocked, at least I was. If you see a red block, that means, of which there's a lot, about 25%. That means that it never, all years, even people going back and entering historical data sets, as long as there's a duration to the checklist, there has not been a single minute of coverage anywhere within that block all years, March through August. That is a lot of red. A a lot of it's in the Mojave. There's, patterns to be seen. And then we looked more at what about, breeding. So the map on the left is the one you just saw. The map on the right shows this shocking absence of, blocks that have either probable or confirmed breeding code. So if you see a red block on that map on the right, that means that there has not been a single checklist with a time duration that has a single probable or confirmed breeding code for any species. You see a mourning dove carrying nesting material, that would have made it unread. And yet here we are. I mean, that's a huge amount of the state where we have very little information. And then I was also like, and bird watching is growing, right? There's more bird watching. Yes, look at this. I mean, it's insane the amount of birders that have grown in the community. California has more eBird users than any other state by far. It's the growth that we've seen during the pandemic hasn't slowed. And this combined with the data gaps, combined with, eBird being this tool that can be used to much more easily, complete a breeding bird atlas versus back in the day with paper records and sending them to a PO box and having them put on, floppy disks and all that. It's time to go. And so why do an atlas? Well, look at this. Birds rely on California. There's more species breeding in California than in any other state. Number one, baby. We have the highest percentage, highest number of birds that breed entirely within the state. Here's, or mostly island scrub jay, yellow-billed magpie, 100%. This was from eBird Status and Trends, and the visual from Sam. And with all of this, I had just seen enough. I was like, let's go. Let's go. It's time. It's time to do this. There's no reason not to do this. Let's do this. Texas has done it. Nevada's done it. We're California. Yes, we're big. Yes, there's a lot of different areas, and yes, it's hard, but guess what? We also have more birders, and guess what? There's a ton of money in California. So I started talking to people, and I reached out, and I've now talked to 49. I reached out to 49 Audubon chapters. I've talked to 24 state coordinators of other state atlases. I've talked to a lot of the county level atlas folks, and it just became very clear that it was time to make this happen. But then the question is, how do you make this happen? And that led me to, after many conversations, the decision to found a new nonprofit entity. And that entity is called California Bird Atlas. It's not called California Breeding Bird Atlas because the word breeding is weird to have in the name of your organization, and also because the organization itself will likely expand to do other types of bird atlases. There's migration bird atlases, there's winter bird atlases, and an atlas at the end of the day is just a collection of maps and charts. And so the organization is called California Bird Atlas, but we will be doing a breeding bird atlas. We're an independent 501c3 nonprofit. The donations to California Bird Atlas are 100% tax deductible. And to do that, you need a founding board of directors. If I had 20 years, I couldn't have put together a stronger board. I'm so proud of this group. Andrea Jones joins me. She's Vice President of California for National Audubon Society. Graham Chisholm, who's now senior strategist at the Wildlands Conservancy. He also founded the Great Basin Bird Observatory in Nevada specifically to do the Nevada State Breeding Bird Atlas. So he has experience with atlases. And Kevin Hunting, who is now retired, but served as the Chief Deputy Director overseeing, I think, over 3,000 employees at the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. He was appointed directly by both governors, Arnold Schwarzenegger and Jerry Brown. After retiring, kind of fell in love with birding, and I started talking to him, and he decided to join our board, and I'm so grateful. I started then putting together a science advisory committee to lead the effort, and this group is just like brings just tears to my eyes. They're such an amazing group. Morgan, who you'll hear from later. We have Ron from California State Parks, Melanie from CDFW, Brian Sullivan, one of the original founders of eBird, still with Cornell, Natalia, incredible assistant professor at Santa Cruz, Phil Unit, who many of you know, as the author of the San Diego County Bird Atlas, Allison at the Natural History Museum, Sam, who you'll hear from later, and Chris Elphick, who's professor at UConn. Chris also was a co-author of the Nevada State Breeding Bird Atlas and is currently leading the Connecticut's second Breeding Bird Atlas. So we have a lot of experience. While I have not personally been involved in the Breeding Bird Atlas before, we have a lot of people on our team who were. But to start a nonprofit, you need partners. You need people to believe in you. You need money. So I started contacting organizations, talked to 49 Audubon chapters, talked to 15 other nonprofits, talked to state agencies, and I started putting together the next slide. Just get ready for how intense this next slide looks. But these are organizations that I've had multiple conversations with each one. They've all agreed graciously to contribute a minimum of $10,000 in funding and foundational support. Look at the number of organizations. I mean, it's really blew my mind reaching out to some of these groups. I really didn't anticipate the just groundswell of support that we've been able to get. And luckily, through many conversations, we've now raised enough money to be officially launching California's first statewide breeding bird atlas on January 1st, 2026, which brings us to the timeline. Field work will be 5 years. It'll be year-round. And then after the 5 years of field work, we'll go into 4 years of data analysis, reporting, application of findings, writing a book. The outputs, there will be a physical book. There will be an ebook. There will also be an online depository of all of the data, for free for the public forever. Both things exist. Why it's a breeding bird atlas, but you're doing it year round. What's up with that? Well, one of the reasons is that in California, there's birds breeding in every single month of the year. Sam pulled these together. Look at this in November. Here's Clark's grebes, including 2 birds on a nest on the 6th of November. In December, here's Cocos boobies breeding, carrying food on Santa Barbara Island. Here's January, Brandt's cormorants, including, at least 1 nest with chicks in San Diego County. In February, here's a Lacan's thrasher with 2 adults and 2 nestlings. Birds are breeding all year. We need coverage every single day of the year. So that's the timeline. This shows a bit about, we can get into this more later, but some of the change in where eBird effort has been in the winter. It changes. We'll be pushing people to areas in the winter where there hasn't been coverage as much. We have entered into an agreement with the Cornell Lab of Ornithology to develop a California Bird Atlas specific version of eBird. And basically, this is our font, in the eBird font with our little logo. This is what it's going to look like on January 1st when you go to ebird.org/Atlas California. it'll take you to a page like this. Maybe, hopefully, we'll be able to replace the picture of that albatross with something that breeds in California. But and at the top left, you usually see eBird, but no, you see California Bird Atlas. So this will be going live, and there will be a button on there where you can join the project. And so at this point, I will stop sharing so that Sam can share, and we can get a little view of what these eBird atlases look like. So this is for North Carolina. You know, this looks like normal eBird, but if you go to explore, and if you you know, want to look up a species, you know, how about what, Carolina chickadee? Let's look at that. Well, here it is, updated in basically real time. It shows you the blocks overlaid onto the state. As you zoom in, you can see even more fine grain data. And if you zoom back out, Sam, you can see the different breeding categories. Basically, you know, the darker, the more confirmed. And up top, you can toggle it from year round, or you can look at you know, specific seasons. And then if you go back, Sam, you can go to the effort map, and this shows across the state in real time how many hours have been done per atlas block. So we're going to have a California version of this. It costs money to get this done, but luckily, with the support of partners like Los Angeles Birders and others, we've been able to raise that money. You can toggle between diurnal effort, nocturnal effort, and you can see in real time sort of like where you know, effort needs to be. There will also be, if you go to back a page, Sam, there's the button, by the way, for join the project. You can also see the Atlas Top 100. Click on that. This will be a new Top 100. If you know a county in North Carolina, you can type it in. Otherwise, you can just type in North Carolina. And that will show you, you'll have options for ranked by species confirmed. You can toggle that ranked by to go species coded, complete checklist. The idea being that this project re-incentivizes birder behavior, not only to chase vagrants, but also to, you know, spread out and cover some of these areas that desperately need coverage. So that's just a little overview of what it looks like on the website. And then I think I can start sharing again, Sam, if you stop, and then we'll show what it looks like on the website version. Am I back to
Yes.
sharing?
Yeah,
Nice. That was pretty seamless. That was pretty good. This is also, once you've joined the project, it's integrated with mobile. And so let's see here, where's there's an option to join the project. So here you'll see on the map, you know, right before you start checklists, it says choose projects. Once you've opted in, you'll see an option for California Bird Atlas. You join. If you say remember your selection, you don't have to do this every time. You start your checklist. And very excitingly, on the right, you'll see a mock-up of what this will look like on the eBird app. So as you're eBirding, you'll be able to see in real time the block boundaries of the atlas. If you start a checklist, a traveling checklist somewhere within that block, and you happen to be getting close to the boundary of that block, when you get into within a certain portion, you know, a certain 100 feet away, or I forget how far away it is, you get a push notification saying, hold up, you know, stay in your block or start a new list for the new block. And so it's integrated in mobile. And of course, this brings us to the whole idea, which is that when you are entering information, it'll give you these codes that a lot of birders are used to, but we also have a lot of education to do, and which is one of the core, values and reasons for existing, is to really get folks more used to using these breeding codes. And there's three categories of breeding codes. There's possible, there's probable, and there's confirmed. Sam, I might kick it to you to talk through this part a little bit. This is a really cool tool that Sam used. And I'll pass it to Sam Saffron, a science director of California Bird Atlas.
Hey everyone. We getting the screen? How's it look?
Yeah, it looks great. Looks good.
All right. Yeah, so we're talking about use of eBird right now for Atlas purposes. And one of the things that is great is that because the data are available, we can download it, we can analyze it ourselves as the Atlas is happening. We just have the ability to make lots of interesting tools to help our project. And one of the things we've been looking at so far is all of the like passively collected breeding evidence data that's already in eBird pre-Atlas. This has never really been visualized before. It's not something that's easily accessible on kind of the normal eBird interface. These data have not been reviewed yet. That's a big part of our project, is going to be doing the quality control and review of all these records. But we've, this is an example of these tools that we could be putting forward. I'm going to attempt to show another tab and how this works a little bit. What's that?
Are you sharing now, or am I sharing?
No,
I
Sam is
should
sharing.
be.
Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
Okay, that's fine. No.
All right.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. So this is a list of species that have been coded in California in the past. We can go to rough grouse and you get a map of this. This is just a really simple thing, but it's meant to illustrate the power of kind of pulling the data for ourselves and doing what we want with it. Make that more accessible. Another example of this that we're really excited about is working with some of the amazing media that's been uploaded to eBird and the Macaulay Library. This is a simple little app that's similar, where for every species, and someone uploads a photo, they're able to tag it with different behaviors. And some of those behaviors correspond pretty well to breeding codes that are used in the Atlas. So you can tag a photo with courtship. You can tag a photo as nest building. It shows a nest. Your photo shows eggs. Your photo shows a bird carrying food, feeding young. And what's amazing is that, like, this feature hasn't been around forever, and not everyone's in the habit of tagging their photos. And there's like a lot of exciting low-hanging fruit. If you want to be the first person to ever upload a photo of, let's see, California thrasher. No one's ever tagged a photo from California of a California thrasher with nest. That's just an example. That's there for you. You can do it. And here are a set of species with 0 tagged photos that include nest building or nest or eggs or feeding young in California. A lot of exciting, these aren't the most abundant breeding species in the state, but they're there. And there's this behavior to document. These photos are great for learning about the plants that are associated. There's a lot we can do with this imagery down the line. Plus, it makes it a little bit fun. A big part of what we'll be doing in the realm of data review is trying to educate people on which codes are acceptable for which species. This is an example of a table that was provided by the New York Breeding Bird Atlas, number 3. A lot of the statewide atlases have done something similar. And there are certain codes that we just shouldn't be using for certain species due to their biology. So this is the top of the table. We have a lot of waterfowl with precocial young. They're not feeding their young. So we shouldn't be coding a wood duck with feeding young, for example. And we can be pulling data from the project as it comes in and reviewing them against tables like these and notifying users when they've run afoul of this to improve their atlasing as it happens and make that dynamic and make sure the data are as reliable as they can be. We've talked to other state atlases that, save this for the end, and then they're reviewing millions of records at a time, literally, and it is difficult to do. So we want to be up on that from the get-go. A lot of you will be familiar with records getting flagged on eBird. There is a similar process to a certain degree within a breeding bird atlas project. Atlas coordinators can review and adjust records submitted to the project with breeding evidence. For example, if a white-crowned sparrow is singing in LA in April and it's coded as S, it is indeed singing, but it is not necessarily indicative of breeding behavior at that location. So an atlas reviewer can recode that record to say, yes, the behavior code is singing male, but the breeding code is no code. Or maybe it's just a total error. You entered, sorry, my screen's blocking me here. You entered fly over when you really meant fledged young, things like that. So there's another level of review to help this process as well.
And that, by the way, for those watching that may be eBird reviewers, that's not on you, that's not in your queue, that's a separate queue, and we are able to make those changes without even contacting the user. We can make those changes directly on the checklist. So.
All right, do people want to see some blocks?
Yeah.
Here's a good number, 16,527. That is the number of blocks in what we think is the final draft block layer for California. Blocks, if you don't know, come from USGS topographic 7.5-minute quads. They are divided into 6, and that creates blocks that are about 3 by 3 miles. And when you do that across a state as large as California, you get a lot of them. This is going to be a logistical challenge. It's going to be a data visualization challenge. It's very hard to see individual blocks at this scale. But these are sizable units of analysis. Each block, just for your reference, is more than 4,000 football fields in size. So these are not tiny, even though they look like that at this scale. Here's some local flavor for you all. Downtown Los Angeles, Dodger Stadium. Just, I imagine this helps kind of position yourselves and understand the scale of these for some of you who haven't done atlasing before. We can do a little tour around the state. The northernmost block is Soda Mountain Southeast. Looks like a beautiful landscape. The southernmost block is near Imperial Beach, the Tijuana River Valley. There's a little sliver of the US that is part of the Imperial Beach Southwest block, where we will be accepting data from. The westernmost block is Cape Mendocino Central East. Sugarloaf Island is off the coast there in Mendocino, and that is the westernmost point in California and our westernmost block. We've made a real effort to make sure we are not leaving out any offshore islands or islets, and you can view the draft block layer on our website. And if you find one that is not included in a block, we will reward you and we will add it before January 1st. Heading east along the Colorado River, Gene Wash Southeast. There's a lot of kind of partial blocks along the southwestern border and the meandering Colorado River, little bits of riparian vegetation and that sort of thing. And we were very careful to make sure all of those were included as well. No area is too small in LA County. We mapped them all. Here's Point Furman near the harbor. And this relates to the kind of the functionality of the app, triggering those alerts if you come near a block boundary. But blocks don't always respect hotspots. Bonelli Regional Park and the reservoir crosses about 4 blocks. So this, for atlasers who are actively working in these areas, You will become familiar with these boundaries, and there will be tools to help you do that. Like I said, we are not limited to the mainland. We're including offshore islands, the Channel Islands, Farallones, and as many of the islets as we could track down. That's the whirlwind tour of the 16,527 blocks of California Breeding Bird Atlas. Next up, we're going to talk about some additional new features that will enhance the science we can generate with this project, and Morgan is going to lead us through that.
Thanks, Sam. So yeah, I get to do the scientific interlude. Oh, I think you're still gonna share the slides, though.
Oh, yes, that's true. I'm back. One sec.
So I'll vamp. So I'll be doing the scientific interlude here. And so Van alluded to the question. And so I'm really excited to share with you. And officially, I cannot take credit for this. This is all Sam Saffron's idea. But when he told me about trying to experiment with this for the California Atlas, I jumped on board immediately. Because as a scientist, I'm always looking for ways to sort of advance the quality of the science we do, particularly when we're sort of crowdsourcing or doing citizen science type science. If we can get the data relatively easily, that really expands the value of that data is really important. So next slide. What is the question? Well, if you've used eBird, you probably have answered the question that is on the screen. Which is this question of whether or not you've submitted a complete checklist, right? So the question reads, is this a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? And you probably don't know exactly how this question is used necessarily, but probably a lot of you have a vague sense for why it's important. Maybe you've never thought about it, but I will say that this question is really crucial to how scientists like myself actually use eBird data. This question allows us to make valid scientific results from non-systematic eBird data. And really kind of importantly, we use a lot of sort of fancy statistics to separate out sort of what we expect to be the true presence or absence or abundance of a species in an area versus the fact that we all know as birders that when we go out and we look for something, it might be there, but we don't actually see it, which is particularly depressing when we're off looking for a cool vagrant. But even when we're looking for normal birds, this is really important for us, particularly as scientists, to differentiate between sort of our imperfect observation and the true underlying state. So this question has been in eBird since eBird essentially started, but it's only about whether or not you've reported the species in a complete way. So we've been able to work with Cornell to agree to essentially add an analog in the context of bird breeding. So next slide. And so that is a complete breeding code question. And so this question extends this concept of complete species to the question of breeding evidence. And so the text is there on the slide, but the question says breeding behavior codes complete. And the question says, does this checklist include all breeding behavior codes you observed that are higher than H and S? And so really what this is doing is that it's analogous to this question about complete species, which allows us to model the probability of detecting a species given that the species is indeed present at a site. And instead, we are now asking, well, also is it complete for breeding codes, which allows us to model the probability of detecting breeding evidence given that the species is indeed breeding at a site. Next slide. And just to throw in some really cool signs of what this type of thing can allow, it allows us to do lots of fun projects that are actually really, really valuable. So this is actually an example from a publication that was done, analysis that was done by USGS looking at golden eagles' use of the East Bay Hills, particularly at Altamont Pass in that area where there's lots of wind turbines. And what they were able to do was build what they call a multi-state model, where you can look both at this whether or not a species or an individual is present or absent in an area, but also if it's present, what's the probability of an actual reproduction, or in this case, successful reproduction. So we can look not just at where species are, but also how they're using the landscape, which of course is the whole reason for doing a breeding atlas, or one of the main reasons for doing a breeding atlas in the first place, is that we can gain this really important knowledge of not just where species are, but how are they using the habitat, how are they using our landscape, and how is that changing over time. And so, as far as we know, this type of modeling has not been applied yet to eBird breeding behavior data. And part of the reason we're pretty sure that has not is because we can't really differentiate this question of like, was the bird actually breeding and the user just didn't actually report it, or did they not actually observe it at all? So by adding in this question, we can kind of really advance the science and really advance the value of this atlas that we'll be doing. Next slide. So you might be wondering, well, how actually are you going to answer the question? We've worked a lot and thought a lot about how we can try and make this as easy as possible. And one of the things that's here is that, these two possible codes for whether or not it's in the appropriate habitat H or whether or not it's a singing bird. In many cases, when we go out birding, you could possibly, if you know the natural history, you could probably put in an H or an S for the vast majority of the species you might be encountering, particularly at the right time of year. And so we thought that this question might not be really useful in the context of those possible codes, and we didn't want to make it really onerous. So that's why this question excludes possible codes. And we're really asking about whether or not you have recorded the highest observed code per species, excluding possible codes. And so if you have recorded the highest observed code, you can say yes if these lower codes are missing, because essentially they were superseded. But you can also say yes if some species have no code, as long as you did not actually observe a probable or confirmed breeding evidence for them. When would you answer no? Well, you'd answer no if you knowingly left off and observed highest level code, like probable or confirmed code. So like if you saw a nest and you're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to enter that because I'm feeling lazy today, then you would say no. But if you can't recall any behaviors you did or did not observe, or if you were only searching for breeding evidence for some species but not at all, if you were like super tuned in to finding bush tit nests, that you weren't even bothering to look for other species or breeding evidence for other species, then that's when you would also say no. So we will be developing educational materials for atlasers specifically related to this question, because we know that this will probably be one of the newest things that we are introducing in this atlas. Sam, back to you.
Sweet. I think it's actually back to me, but Sam, can you keep presenting?
Yeah, I can.
And maybe on this first slide, actually, you can kind of vamp a little bit. But another kind of sub-project that we're doing at the same time that we're doing this, 9-year project, 5 years of field work and 4 years of data analysis and writing. The project has a $6.5 million budget. Is that we want to, atlases, breeding bird atlases have the most power when there's something to compare them to. There was not an original California statewide breeding bird atlas with the same blocks and all that we can easily compare it to. However, there is a lot of data out there. We have invaluable information provided by the county atlases, such as the one shown. I had the fortune of visiting with the late great Larry Allen at his house before he passed, and he was so thrilled that this was underway. There's also data from many other sources. For example, breeding bird atlases were conducted in San Bernardino, next slide, San Bernardino and Riverside counties, two of the largest counties in the whole country, but they were never completed. I was able to track down Barbara Carlson. Barbara Carlson organized both in the late 80s to mid 90s, and just sadly, due to lack of resources, the projects were abandoned. I was able to track down in a storage shed in the Rimrock Reserve the original 5 cardboard boxes full of field cards that have never been digitized. And so part of what we'll be doing is raising funding to get these records digitized on eBird, so that all of this incredible work that was done by Barbara Carlson and the hundreds of volunteers, won't be in vain. This will be available going forward. Next slide. This is what some of the field cards look like, just to give you an idea of how much easier we'll have it now with eBird. This is, if you're participating in the San Bernardino or Riverside County breeding bird atlases, you got one of these cards. This is the front, and then on the next slide, you'll see the back, and then you would need to, either connect with Barbara or send them to a PO box, and all of this is obviously now done in eBird. Next slide. And Sam, you can talk a bit about this.
Not too much to say, but just like we can compare atlas results from the statewide California breeding bird atlas to the older county level atlases, we'll be able to do that against other even older sources. There's just such a wealth of museum data and historical reporting on the distribution of birds in the state. And the technology is at a point where we can really leverage that to analyze change over time. And we're really hoping to encourage atlasers to visit places that have quality historical data available. For example, here's a report from 1911 on a visit to Mystic Lake in late May, 115 years ago. And there's great info about the number of nests, the species that were detected breeding, the ones that weren't. I imagine there's a lot of people who'd love to resurvey Mystic Lake in late May, 150 years after G. Willett and Antonin J. did, and you don't even need a bird-related last name to do it. No requirement.
And a special shout out to Tony Metcalf, who I know already has done a lot of work on this specific one in general too. So next slide. How to get involved. This is a big project, probably by some metrics, the largest community science driven research initiative for avian studies in state history, you could say. We need everybody. Next slide. Right now we're live, californiabirdatlas.org. At this point, the thing we need the most of is money. We've been amazed that we launched this website a couple of weeks ago, and we've already gotten like dozens of donations from people without even really pushing it out there. 100% of your donations are tax deductible. You'll get a receipt that you can write them off. Also, we're going to be following up and asking, which species you would like your money to go to sponsoring. And so you can go to californiabirdatlas.org and click that donate button. And I immediately get a notification in my email, and I immediately get really excited and feel really good about everything. And so I thank all of the donors so far, and to all our partners going forward. And then also, if you were to scroll down, importantly, you would see a field to sign up for our mailing list. We've received already, I think, over 500 signups to our email list. So it's just been incredible to see the enthusiasm for this project. But yeah, there's going to be other ways to get involved. And if you want to get more involved, please reach out to me directly, van@californiabirdatlas.org. We are putting together other committees. We are, exploring the ideas of regional coordinators. We are going to be having, paid field technicians. There's a lot of opportunities for getting more involved than just atlasing, but at the very least, signing up for that mailing list is amazing, and any donation we get, we're very grateful for. So thank you so much in advance. And with that, I believe it is now time for the next slide, which is the Q&A.
Fantastic, Van and team. For anyone who has a who has a question, please pop it into the Q&A section of Zoom. That way we can keep track of it and we won't miss any questions.
There's already one question, Van. I'm going to ask it for Gregory Heaton, who asks, is it expected that literally every block will be covered at least once, excluding military zones? I feel like there's multiple parts of that question that can be answered.
There is. I can take the military zones part first, and then maybe you can take the second half. But we how should I say this very quickly? I have a very high amount of confidence that we will be able to cover blocks that are military bases. There's a lot of conversations going on, maybe not right now, it's shut down, but with different individuals at different places. And there's a lot of incentives for, landowners, both if they're federal government landowners or land trusts that don't typically allow land access, or ranchers, all kinds of access issues. There's a lot of reasons why they would, the breeding bird atlas kind of acts as an excuse to get access to certain areas. And we've seen that. That's the researched topic that has been shown to happen among state atlases. So I definitely wouldn't write off military bases at all. And then Morgan, to this point about every block, do we expect something in every block? Maybe I'll have you take that one, or Sam.
Sam?
The short answer is we don't necessarily need to cover every block. I don't think that is the expectation.
We don't need to. The question was, expect. Do we expect? I hope.
Yeah.
But
I
we
hope so
don't need
too.
to.
Yeah, we don't need to because of the modeling that Morgan discussed. But at the same time, there are lots of reasons of why having actual observations of birds as opposed to model results saying that a bird is somewhere is valuable when it comes to the laws and regulations that dictate environmental policy in our state. So to the degree to which we can get actual humans covering locations across the state is very valuable. But we will be we'll likely be choosing, if not a formal like priority block network, we'll be developing tools that tell atlasers where their time would be most valuable from a science and management perspective. Which blocks in the state, if you go to, will that provide the most useful information to improve the models? Which areas are most likely to change in the near future? So we need coverage now to get a good baseline, things like that.
Yeah, so I'll follow up on that and also address Alexander Yan's question from the YouTube live stream, who asked, what's the sampling intensity required or expected for our blocks? So the standard across atlases is that you have cumulatively 20 hours of atlasing within each block. That's the goal for blocks. Now, many big states, as Sam kind of alluded to, these priority blocks, many big states have sort of given up the hope of trying to get 20 hours of atlasing during the breeding season, which in California is complex, in every block. So in a lot of states, big states, what they do is they separate out priority blocks. And so they try and meet that 20-hour goal within some subset, 25%, 15%, 50%, something like that, of the blocks of the state. And sometimes those are randomly chosen or in a grid, something like that. We are not starting with a priority block lineup, at least not in the first year. And what we want to try and do is to basically see how far we can get just in year one, and then start to basically use tools like prioritization and more sort of actually thought out learning tools, which might say that if you live in Reading and you want to go atlasing, where should you go? Versus if you live in Bakersfield and want to go atlasing, and where should you go? And it's not necessarily assigning you to some pre-assigned block that might have already met its 20 hours, but Sam will have written some clever code that will actually tell you what is the most optimal place at that moment that you should go.
Great.
It's 20. Betty asked 20 hours per year per block, and the answer is no, it's 20 hours over the course of the atlas, which is for many places, like, here in Los Angeles, that's not going to be hard to get to very quickly.
One quick thing to add, just to put this into context, is over the most recent 5-year period, there were, I think it was 3.5 million hours that eBirders submitted within California. So if it just takes 10% of those evenly distributed across the state to get 20 hours per block. And not to say that that is easy, but it is, like, we're thinking about orders of magnitude. It's not totally unreasonable that we can get really quality coverage.
Fantastic. Again, I just want to remind everyone, if you have a question, please pop it into the Q&A. It'll help us keep track of everything.
Sam, I have a quick question for you that's coming from Alex Coffey. Will the eBird portal be multilingual at all?
I'm not 100% sure. That should be a priority for sure. And the eBird website has been translated into those languages, and I imagine that carries over, but we should confirm that.
I agree. That's a great thing for us to confirm. Another question that's coming from Lily, whether or not it's possible to hide the breeding codes of certain species, such as owls, which could be easily disturbed, and threatened species on checklists to the general public, like how eBird has already doing for sensitive species.
If a species is sensitive in eBird, the results from within the project for the breeding behaviors are also restricted in the same way. And it'll be really important for us to educate atlasers on kind of ethics around nests and young and things like that.
I can pop in with the question from Lance in the chat. Is 20 hours of effort the only criteria? In Maine, for example, it also required a certain percentage of birds coded, probable, or confirmed, which is more rigorous than just 20 hours. Same or more.
Yeah, these completion criteria there are a lot of great examples of them, and it is something we are going to be working out. And I agree that that kind of set amount of hours is limiting. A lot of atlases start with many and give up on them and end up with very few. Connecticut's one of the unique ones that started with one and ended up with 3. We are giving ourselves a little bit of space to kind of assess what the uptake in this is before we commit to completion criteria. But that's a great example of one that's a little more dynamic.
I believe it was Phil Unit who was talking about how for the San Diego Atlas, it wasn't just that it was 20 hours per block, but it was 20 hours and you have to hit all the major habitats within the block. And so part of this is, of course, it's hard. I mean, we could come up with a GIS-based quantitative way to actually look at where the checklists are and map them across habitats to measure that as completeness. And maybe we'll get around to doing that. But part of this is also just the instructions we give to people and how we talk about it when we say that we want you to be doing 20 hours, or we want cumulatively 20 hours. We want you to be thinking about, well, where are the major habitats? Where are the different types of species that could be breeding in this block? And can we get access to those areas and try and find them?
During the main atlas, they actually changed the criteria partway through when they realized that it was too restrictive. They had originally wanted 25 hours plus 50% confirmed, and they ultimately relaxed the percent confirmed to a total of confirmed plus probable reaching some value, because it was much easier to get probables than confirmed.
Yeah.
They didn't have that in their documentation. The only way you knew about it was because they had outreach sessions on Zoom every week where they repeatedly told people this. So yeah, it wasn't rigid. Once they got going, they realized they needed to adjust it. So what you just said about possibly doing that, I suspect you'll have to keep that in mind for a number of things.
There's one question from Betty that I can answer. Can you submit a standard eBird checklist as well as a qualified CBA checklist at the same time? Double duty. Yes, every checklist that you submit into the eBird Atlas first goes through eBird, core eBird, just the way it normally does. So once you join the project and you submit an Atlas checklist, that checklist will still fill up your normal eBird stats, your normal lists, your normal everything like that will show up just the same. It'll go into the review queue just the same. It's still all regular core eBird. It then just also goes to this new one. So the answer is not only can you, but yes, both automatically happen. So,
but most importantly, you don't have to submit 2 lists.
No.
No,
Right.
it's all combined. I also realized that I accidentally dismissed a question from the Q&A that had been asked via the live chat. So to Allie, your question about how are you handling introduced bird breeding, and are we going to be leaving out naturalized populations? And the answer is no. If you can report the species to eBird, then you can report its breeding behavior. So if you happen to want to be reporting on the rose-ringed parakeets in Bakersfield, you can be documenting that nesting behavior.
Awesome. Tori asked, in all your conversations with legislators, how interested, supportive are they of incorporating the results into future policy efforts? Conversations are ongoing. There are certain things that, I'm not at liberty to say at the moment, but what I will say is that we've had very promising conversations with multiple state agencies. This is a groundbreaking opportunity. 44 states have this conservation tool where they're able to look at a statewide grid and for all species and show with documentation where these species are breeding in a set time period. And California doesn't have that right now in an easily accessible period, and they will be getting that. And so there's a lot of appetite for that, and the conservation impact of this is in my mind, the primary driver, as well as just getting more people involved. And so, the response has been really strong.
Great.
Desi asks those questions. If I see, for example, 20 yellow warblers in a block, of which 10 are exhibiting breeding behavior, how can I indicate that? Or is confirming one instance of breeding in a block enough? I laugh only because we've talked so much about this in our science committee. But Sam, you want to take a shot?
Well, one answer is that the data we collect with paid field technicians will be getting kind of that rigorous abundance data. eBird, as it's set up, is not really well equipped to distinguish that within a single checklist, but we're encouraging people to be collecting kind of all the highest level of breeding they observe for every species every time they submit a list. That might be multiple lists from one block on one day or multiple days. So there is a certain amount of like redirecting effort once someone confirms a species in a block, but that is kind of the prioritization tools and completion criteria that we've been discussing. I imagine Morgan and Van have.
Yeah, I mean, as an ornithologist, the finding a nest is like a gold mine, and so I personally would love to have as many really good records, geolocated records, maybe photographs of nests as possible. And so it's the type of thing where, if you really, really like nest finding, we might encourage you to basically do stationary points stationary checklists every time you find a nest. And so maybe you don't want to actually do, I don't know, going through a marsh and doing a stationary checklist for every yellow warbler nest, but for some of the bigger things and rarer things that might be more sparse, then we definitely would want that if you were doing in the process of a really, really long checklist. You'd consider that kind of like an incidental in the same way that maybe you're doing a long drive and you suddenly are doing an incidental as you're driving along. That's a great question there, Desi, that we can think about how we can best advise people to make sure that we're getting sort of the highest quality and usable data as people are going out and observing.
Awesome.
One thing we forgot to say is that obviously we have the exact lat long of every checklist that's submitted. So we know where within these relatively large blocks that happens. And when we use that data to develop the statistical models, we will be mostly using that like fine scale data. We could aggregate it and display it and summarize it at block levels, but they're kind of a tool for that purpose in a large way to like organize and direct effort as opposed to the unit of analysis when we analyze the data.
Awesome. I skipped over one, sorry, from Lance. Maybe Morgan, you could take this one. What about safe dates for breeding for each species? You haven't discussed this. It will vary across the state.
Right.
That's a great question. So if you're not familiar with safe dates are the dates that off analysis set, which say that if you observe essentially breeding behavior that is not direct evidence, like a confirmed record, like an adult on a nest, but possible or probable nesting evidence. If you observe that behavior within these dates, then the atlas says, okay, yeah, that is evidence of breeding. But if you observe that behavior outside of those dates, some off analysis will say, no, we're actually not going to really count that because that individual or that species could be doing this weird thing at a weird time. As Lance really sort of smartly, astutely recognizes, California is a big state, and the phenology in the southern border is not the same as the phenology in the northern border, and which poses some challenges for set safe dates across the entire state. And I would say as a scientist that we probably don't right now at this moment on November 4th know enough about the breeding phenology of every single species across that latitudinal extent to be able to put up really good safe dates for every species. And so probably what we're going to end up doing is actually sort of giving some general recommendations, but then doing a lot of filtering and cleaning up post hoc. So we have a long period of time for analysis and data crunching after the ALICE is finished. And once we have a lot of data, then we can actually start to model phenology. That's one of the things I love to do in my science. And so we can start to actually create these models of when species should be breeding, and then we can start to look at really unique out of range records that might not actually be direct evidence, and we can account for them that way.
Great.
There's a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Maybe Sam, will previously reported breeding codes be taken into account for formation of the atlas data?
We will apply our data quality review process to all the old data, and we will use it for our own analyses and really hope to make that available to others and include in our own data displays. But the data that's shown within the eBird project on the eBird website is just from the Atlas period. So those records won't appear on, for instance, the species maps on the website.
And to kind of reiterate on that, like for any breeding bird atlas, they are defined as a set time period, and our atlas period is 2026 through 2030. So those are the date bands that we're looking for records for. So while historical data before that is interesting to us and we want to bring that into comparative analyses, any data from any source submitted before January 1st, 2026 will not go into any of the atlas products.
And there's a question from Gregory. He seems like he's hitting right on the nose here. Besides signing up for the email list, is there anything we need to do to be able to join the eBird project and start submitting atlases right away when the new year arrives?
I think Morgan said it first at 12:01. He's going to get on ebird.org/Atlas California, go outside, try to hear two great horned owls singing as a pair and get that on there as the first code. No, at this point, it's a waiting game. We're waiting for 12 o'clock midnight, January 1st, when that website goes up at eBird. And at that point, all you have to do is click a button, join this project, you're automatically joined. And at that point, you just select it from your mobile app, or you can submit it through the website. And then we very much hope and expect that every single checklist that you submit for 5 years is through the eBird Atlas portal system. Seriously.
Yeah.
And so once it is and set as a default, you won't really notice it. So yeah.
There isn't any reason why you wouldn't want to in California.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting. Ali Sheehy also asks again, have you cleared with state parks to access properties before official openings for purposes of the census?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
Go ahead. I was going to say, I'm not sure from this question whether or not Ali is asking about getting access early in the morning, or whether or not just getting access to the parks. But Van, answer the question about access to state parks.
Yeah, so Ron Milster, we have on our science advisory committee. He works at California State Parks.
Right.
We're still having conversations with folks at California State Parks. But what I can say is not only at state parks, but across all, both federal and state agencies, there's overwhelming support for allowing access for not like full blown in every installation or everything, like everyone can just go everywhere. It's going to be a bit more fine-tuned than that, but across the board, I've been blown away by the positive response from both federal, state agencies, land trusts. Yeah, so we're excited to work with our agency partners.
Fantastic. So what are your next plans for outreach for basically education? We have a lot of birders out there to educate.
We do. eBird will be sending out, correct me if I'm wrong, Sam or Morgan, but I think I heard this, that eBird will be sending out an email right around January 1st to every email address that has ever submitted even a single checklist in California to let them know that this is happening. So that right there is a pretty monumental outreach piece. We are going to be launching our own YouTube channel. We'd love to do more webinars with LA Birders. We're doing webinars with other of our founding partners in the upcoming weeks and months. I'll be going up and down the state and meeting with local chapters and giving workshops. We'll also be able to deputize deputy trainers that can train people on the different breeding codes. We'll have YouTube, short videos about brown-headed cowbird and what happens when you type in they're building a nest and that's not possible, and some of the filter stuff, but also what counts as territorial, and really get into the weeds of some of these questions. And so yeah, we have a lot of levers to pull, and we're happy to be partners with Audubon California, with the Institute for Bird Populations, with Klamath Bird Observatory, with the Southern Sierra Research Station, with a lot of really amazing organizations, and the Natural History Museum of San Diego, or San Diego Natural History Museum. And so, yeah, there's a lot of outreach channels. It's a full-time thing, and yeah, even a full-time job.
Yeah, it's gonna be a huge project, needless to say. Desi or Lance, anything, Mark, anything else pop up that you would like to ask at the moment? Yeah, I guess not. Van, Sam, and Morgan, thank you very much for a wonderful introduction to the California Breeding Bird Atlas. We are so excited to get going on this project. And needless to say, we'll be here for any future webinars or words that any further presentations that you need. And do you
Awesome,
guys?
man. And I want to thank again Los Angeles Birders, one of the first groups to come on as a founding partner. And each founding partner gets to pick a sponsored species. Bell Sparrow, it was easy. It's all yours, and that'll come to represent your organization throughout the duration of the project. And we're just so proud to be working with you and all of our many other partners. And thank you again so much for the opportunity, and looking forward to continued work.
Absolutely. Thank you all very much. And don't forget, next week, in a related topic, we have Kimball Garrett talking about the LA County bird list. Kimball, as you may know, was one of the major spokes.
Co-author.
Yeah, well, he was, besides being co-author, he was a major instigator for the original Breeding Bird Atlas in LA County, along with Larry Allen and Mark Weimer. So that'll be exciting. You can pepper Kimball with a few questions. He loves to answer questions. And with that, thank you again to Van, Sam, and Morgan. And we will see everyone next week. Thank you all very much.
Night.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
care.
Thank you.
Take care. Good night, everyone.